Cryptonauts, and welcome back to another episode of Cryptocurrency Chat. This particular episode is very special because we're going to be talking about Hedera Hashgraph. This is the first time that I'm officially talking about it on the podcast, and I'm very excited to bring Christian Hasker with us today. But before we get started, first I want to thank all the listeners all around the world. So far, we've been able to reach 85 nations around the globe, which is amazing. So thank you for listening to the podcast and helping spread crypto. This is awesome. So with that said, Christian, how are you doing?
I am doing great, John. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Great. You sound great. I also have my co-host, Mike. Mike, you there?
Hello.
Awesome. So with that said, Christian, my first thing that I like to do is ask my guest, what did they do before they got into crypto? So if you don't mind, who are you? You know, I always like to get into the personality, the person behind the code, behind the blockchain, behind the face, your experience. So go ahead.
Who am I? Yes, that's an existential question. So I started out my career like way back when, actually as a teacher. So I taught English and French and music at an international school. And from there, at the height of the dot-com boom, my wife, you can tell from my accent, I am not American. I am from England. My wife is from just outside of San Francisco. So we decided to move to San Francisco, and it was the height of the dot-com craze. So this was like 2000. And I was done teaching, and I wanted to get into technology. Everyone was into technology. And I got a job in inside sales, and really basic inside sales, where we were called cold call monkeys. We had a sheet of leads, and we would just bash the phones all day long. And I was selling database optimization software, and turned out to be pretty good at it. And that company made it through the dot-com bust, which was pretty interesting experience. And we actually got acquired by a much larger technology company. And because I knew a lot about this database optimization software, I was actually recruited to go into product marketing. And that's how I started to get into marketing. From there, I was really in the database space for the rest of my career, and left that company to join a very hot startup that was commercializing the database that was invented and open sourced by Facebook to power their inbox search functionality. That was a project called Apache Cassandra. And Apache Cassandra is a distributed database. And distributed databases and distributed ledgers have quite a bit in common. So that was a very hot startup, and got a little bit burnt out there. Started up my own consulting company that was really focused on helping other open source software companies that were commercializing open source software, helping them with messaging and go to market. And actually, a friend of mine who had worked at DataStax, this open source database software company, was helping the founders. It was before Hedera. It was, Hashgraph at that time. And they needed some help doing the initial launch, messaging, marketing of Hashgraph as a public network. And so I went over to help them, with a view to just helping them launch and then going on my merry way. I really did not want to work at another startup again. I was pretty burnt out on it. But Hashgraph and Hedera Hashgraph are so unique. The founders have such a compelling vision. And Mance, who is the co-founder and CEO, and Lehman, who's the co-founder and chief scientist, they asked me to come to Dallas, where they're based, and just talk with them about the possibility of joining full-time. I said to my wife, hey, I'll fly to Dallas. I'm no way going to do it. Don't worry. I'm not going to get sucked into this. I came back. I was like, I think I should think about this for a little while. And a month later, I said to man, it's okay, I'm in. And that was, that was over 3 years ago now. And I'm glad I said yes. It's been an interesting ride. So I head up marketing for Hedera. We have a small team at Hedera, and we have a lot of fun. It's been a crazy ride, and don't regret a minute of it.
Awesome. So, what's interesting, which I didn't know, is you worked on Hashgraph systems already before even Hedera existed, right?
Correct. So Hashgraph is a consensus algorithm that was invented by Dr. Lehman Baird. And to test the algorithm, they actually had some companies use it in a permissioned environment. And, for example, a large credit union consortium used it as a private ledger. But the plan all along and the vision was to have Hashgraph underpin a public ledger. And Hashgraph is different from traditional blockchain technologies. We can get into some of those differences. And the idea was to have me come on and recruit a little team and really take the public ledger, the public network to market and grow that ecosystem. And it's been fun.
Nice. I do want to roll back a little bit and still get to know who you are a little bit. When did you first hear about blockchain? Did you hear about Bitcoin first, Ethereum, some stable coins? What was the first trigger word that you heard? And that really
so that company, that company that I was at, Data Stacks, commercializing Cassandra. There was a guy there. So I joined that company. I did some consulting for them in late 2011. I joined in 2012. In 2013, there was this guy, super smart engineer, and he was mining Bitcoin, and he was telling everyone about it. And we thought he was crazy. During lunch in the cafe, he's like, "Oh, you got to get into this thing. It's the next big thing." And we thought we were in the next big thing, right? We were big data. That was a huge movement back then. And I remember being so dismissive of him, thinking he was crazy. If I'd listened to him and started mining Bitcoin, then maybe things would be different.
You know what's interesting? That everyone that I've had on the podcast has so far pretty much said generally the same thing when they were first introduced to Bitcoin, is they dismiss it the first time round. So far, there hasn't been anyone that said, "Oh my God, I got to do this right now," because nobody truly understand what the concept of blockchain technology was. So trying to explain that back then was nearly impossible to try to wrap your head around that, right? In 2012, there wasn't really many exchanges out there. There's a handful of them. Now it's unbelievable. There's thousands around, right? Heck, we even had the Coinbase IPO just yesterday. That's an amazing thing that just happened. That's stamped in history now, right? But it's one of those things that I think the general people that are into tech have a general understanding of what blockchain technology is. We still have a stretch to go to get those people that don't know tech to understand what blockchain tech is. We still got to strive for that. Now we're moving forward to something completely different, which is hash graphing. That's something completely different. And that's why we're doing this podcast today. So, Christian, let's see. Should we continue on, or should we ask you a little more questions? No, let's move forward. To Hedera Hashgraph. Now, as you can see on the screen, to all the viewers that are watching this live, and by the way, everyone that's watching this live, if you have a question for Christian, you can go ahead and ask the question here, and I'll make sure I ask that to him, right? So we do have a handful of people watching right now. Make sure no sound from the interviewer. That's interesting. Okay. I apologize. Let's see. What is going on? Christian, test your microphone, please.
Hello.
Looks good on my side. Huh.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Are you able to watch it live on the YouTube channel? So once again, those that are watching live, let me know if the audio is working for Christian. My side looks fine. Okay. We're going to continue on. You know what? I don't want to continue on unless I make sure that this audio is working fine. So,
Yeah, I'm not getting the audio on YouTube.
no audio, huh? Just my luck.
Another day in technology.
Okay. I'm not sure why it's not working.
Dominic M is saying that the interviewer, which I assume is you, John, is very quiet.
On my side. Okay.
On the YouTube, yeah. But they can, seems like they can hear me.
They can hear you. Okay. That's a good thing. We can hear Christian. Interviewer is very quiet. Yeah, actually, okay, thank you. I just turned up my microphone. You should be able to hear me a lot better. I apologize for that. Let's continue on. So with that said, let's go ahead and start off talking about Hedera Hashgraph. Christian, go through a quick little summary of what Hedera Hashgraph is, and then we'll get into some nitty-gritty questions.
Sure. So Hedera Hashgraph is a public decentralized ledger, a DLT, that is similar to blockchain in what it can do, but the underlying technology is very, very different. So it is built on this Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So all blockchains and distributed ledger technologies, what they all have to do is you have a set of computers which have to come to consensus on the veracity, the validity of transactions. And in blockchain, how that works is you have these computers which crunch algorithms and compete to solve an algorithmic problem so that they can add a block to the chain. And then that gets added to the chain, and the losing nodes, those blocks just get discarded. So that is the way the blockchain technology works. With Hashgraph, what Lehman set out to solve was how can you come to consensus very, very quickly, but also not sacrifice either security or throughput. And most blockchain technologies have to have a trade-off, either for speed or for security. So he set out to solve this problem, and he came up with Hashgraph. So Hashgraph has two very unique properties. One is called gossip about gossip. Gossip is just a way that you communicate information very quickly among nodes. If you're in a traditional office setting and you tell me a secret, you're like, hey, Christian, don't tell anyone. But then I tell Mike, you can see how gossip really cascades through an office setting very, very quickly. Gossip in gossip protocol in technology is the same way. You tell one node something, they tell another node something, and it really escalates very rapidly until everyone knows what you know. So what Lehman came up with is, instead of just gossiping the information, how about I also add a little bit of extra information? That is, I will also know who told me something, when they told me it, and who they learned it from. And with that information, you can build this hash graph. And the other property that it has is something called virtual voting. So if you know all the information that everyone else knows, then you also know how they would vote. And so you don't have to ask them for their vote because you know how they'll vote. And these two properties are huge breakthroughs, and they allow Hashgraph, this consensus algorithm, to be incredibly fast, to be what we called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, which is the highest form of security you can get in a distributed system. And it has this property, oh, I'm glad you're showing it on the screen for everyone, of fairness. So you can fairly order transactions, which is hard to do in a traditional blockchain system, because in a blockchain system, you can pay more gas in order to have your transactions submitted to the block ahead of other people. In Hedera Hashgraph, you cannot do that. Everything is just ordered the way that the nodes come to consensus on the validity and the order of those transactions. So that is Hedera Hashgraph on the technology side. And then another unique property of Hedera Hashgraph is the governance side as well. So what Mance and Lehman set out to do on the governance side is, how can you have a governance model which starts decentralized and over time ensures that it will be decentralized over time? So they came up with this model that is based on actually the Visa model. So when Visa was actually Bank Americard, this chap called D. Hock was brought in to figure out how to get banks cooperating with one another. And he came up with this model where the banks themselves would run the network. They would all agree on how to run the network and have this thing called Visa, which is the whole payment network and payment system. But then they could commercialize it however they wanted, but they would all have to run the network together. So the Hedera governing model is, you have this large group of global organizations, very well-known brand names, that come together. They run the nodes, the initial set of nodes on the network. They govern the code base of the network, and they guarantee that the network itself will not split into other networks. And they are decentralized in industry, so it's not dominated by one industry. They're decentralized in geography, so they span 6 continents. And they are decentralized in time. So they are actually term limited, where they can only serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then they have to leave the council. And this way, no one can consolidate power over time and then become a bad actor. Beautiful. So it's the technology and the governance which really make Hedera unique.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So in regards to the community itself, the Hedera community, that's what got me really fascinated with Hedera. There's so many blockchains out there. It's like a tornado of crypto. But Hedera has been one of those platforms, services out there that is within the eye of the tornado, of the hurricane, right? It's such a beautiful piece of technology that the community, and I'm pretty much connected with a lot of blockchain platforms out there, and it's so amazing that the Hedera community has come together and is just driving this, spearheading this piece of technology way ahead. It's so unbelievable. Everyone's super excited about this. And so I want to ask you, Christian, what is coming out for the near future with the Hedera Hashgraph platform?
Yes, so we are iterating on the platform, very, very quickly. And when we launched in September 2019, there were 3 core services at the time. One was a smart contract service that was based on the Solidity programming language from Ethereum. We had a cryptocurrency service which used our native cryptocurrency HBAR, where you can do real-time payments, micropayments, things like that. And then we had a file service where you can store files in a distributed manner. Very quickly, we saw that actually people were using the speed and low latency of the cryptocurrency service to do interesting things. And so based off of that, we brought to market something called the Hedera Consensus Service. And the Hedera Consensus Service is a service where you can use the consensus properties of Hashgraph and build your own services, applications. You can take a private network and plug into public network and get public trust. You can, do some amazing things with IoT devices because you get the speed and, high throughput, low latency. Then, because Hashgraph is so fast and so cheap, the next wave was people wanting to tokenize assets. And sure, you could do that with a smart contract, but smart contracts tend to be expensive, as you see on platforms like Ethereum, and they tend to be slow, as you see on other platforms. So what we did is we built functionality at the Hashgraph level, at the consensus level, which allows you to mint tokens very quickly. You can trade those tokens very cheaply and very fast. So what you're going to see us come out with is additional functionality that really complement those two services. There is, since launching the Hedera token service, organizations that are building on Hedera want more capability and programmability with non-fungible tokens, for example. So there's a lot of energy being put in from the community into building out two ways to do non-fungible tokens. One is at the layer one, so at that native Hashgraph level, and the other is actually using that Hedera consensus service as a layer two to do non-fungible tokens as well. So with layer two, you sacrifice some of the attributes of layer one, where you get all of the trust of those nodes. You have to run your own sort of private network nodes to run some of that logic, but you can do that, and you can do that very cheaply. So you're going to see us with non-fungible tokens coming out with a lot of functionality there. The other thing that we're excited about is we're going to be launching a piece of functionality called scheduled transactions, where you can actually have multiple signers sign a transaction for a time in the future. So let's say you want to make sure that you all submit a transaction before a tax deadline, for example, on April 10th, 2022 at midnight, to make sure business taxes are paid. You can all sign that transaction in advance, and then on that date and time, it will just go through. And so that's a very cool piece of functionality. The other thing that we're putting a lot of energy and activity into are this notion of state proofs. And state proofs are something that Lehman has talked a lot about. So in a traditional blockchain system, how do you know that a transaction happened at that period in the past? You actually have to go and run all the transactions and crunch through, and there's a lot of computational effort to replay the history of the blockchain, but you can find that transaction. With a state proof, it's essentially like taking a snapshot in time of the state of the ledger and validating that snapshot is absolutely true. Then, if you need to go to, let's say, into a court of law and prove that a transaction happened at that moment in time, and the balance was this, and it went through at that, and the network came to consensus, you can have this state proof. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on. The other thing that's always constant is making the network easier and easier to develop against. So that's just constant improvements.
All right. So my question I want to ask you is it's a new platform. Are there career opportunities for developers to come in and start working on Hedera?
Absolutely. Yes. Great question. So all of the services code is open source and available on GitHub. And we have, just like Ethereum has Ethereum improvement proposals, we have Hedera improvement proposals. And this is an opportunity for people in the community to develop ideas, submit those ideas, flesh them out. Those ideas then go to the technical committee that's comprised of some of the council members. They review those Hedera improvement proposals and then prioritize them as part of the roadmap. And what we want to see happen is the person or people that came up with that idea actually develop that idea and deploy that idea. And that then gets incorporated into the code base. And I'd say we're early on in that journey, but we're starting to see some really good traction there. And, if you're a developer interested in either traditional blockchain technology or Hashgraph technology, come and check it out. And, there's probably ideas that you're going to have which will really help just accelerate the development of the network overall.
So continuing on with that question, what language code do you have or that you're using to work on Hedera? Because I saw I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so the actual Hashgraph code is written in Java, but you do not have to be a Java developer to work on Hashgraph. We have SDKs in multiple languages. So we have JavaScript, Go, .NET, a Java one, obviously. I think there's Rust. So, the beautiful thing about Hedera is that, and this really goes to the ease of use aspect of it, is we want to abstract away a lot of the actual complexities of building on a distributed ledger technology into this SDK layer. So there's a lot of logic that goes into that. So if there's a language that you use that is not currently supported in an SDK, you can build that SDK and make it available to the community and see, if you gain traction and things like that. So there's tons of opportunity, and I'd say it really doesn't matter what language you program in, you're going to be able to contribute to the project.
So I'm expecting that a lot of people from the Ethereum community, the Ethereum developers, are going to be migrating over to Hedera just because it's so affordable and so easy to use. You can literally just copy and paste someone's EIP protocol from over there and move it over to Hedera and just do minor tweaks to it and use it for Hedera. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We do still have the smart contract service that if you want to port a smart contract from Ethereum directly to Hedera, you can do that with no code change. But if you want to reimagine how, let's say you've written something on Ethereum, and like you said, it's expensive and it's slow, and you want to take advantage of the attributes of Hedera, then you can reimagine, if I had a redo on this architecture, how would I do it differently? And we're actually seeing, I wouldn't say it's a tsunami yet, but it's a wave of, businesses that want to take advantage of the high throughput, low latency, and low cost. Because another thing that we, really our governing council led the way here, they are large enterprises. When they budget software use, it has to be predictable. So instead of pegging our transaction fees to the native currency HBAR, the governing council, the coin committee, it's called, said, no, we're going to actually peg the transaction fee to the dollar, and then you just pay in HBAR whatever the dollar equivalent is. So in this way, you have incredibly predictable transaction fees. So if you're a developer on one of these blockchain technologies today, where your gas fees can, balloon, and you want to, let's say you want to transact something at, $10, but it's costing you $80 in transaction fees, the economics just don't make sense. So that has been a big impetus for why people are looking at Hedera.
Absolutely.
Could micropayments be utilized on Hedera? Like, let's say you wanted to charge a fraction of a penny for something.
Absolutely. So the lowest cost of a transaction on Hedera is for a Hedera consensus service message. And that costs 0.0001, so a hundredth of a penny, that is, a hundredth of a cent. So
that'll always be that?
If it won't always be that, it won't be a lot more of that, because the thinking behind the pricing is really on the computational side of things. Like, how much computational power does it take to do this? And because of the efficiencies of Hashgraph, a Hedera consensus message just doesn't take a lot of computational power. So you're not paying a lot for that. So I can't say it will always be that, but it's hard for me to imagine that it would be a lot more than that. And if we did change the pricing, then you as a developer get a lot of advance notice that change is going to be made as well. So we have a calculator on the website. Actually, if you go to network, there's actually a fee estimator, and you can play around with that and see what your application costs would be for different types of transactions.
That's cool. It's actually really cool. Now, can you walk us through what specifically would have to happen for the transaction prices to increase?
Yes, actually, we have just posted, what a timely question, Mike. Just today or yesterday, I don't know, all the days blend in together, but we did actually make a fee change. So it was 0.001 cent to create an account on Hedera. And what we have seen is over time, bots will be set up where they just create, tons of accounts. So that takes up additional storage on the ledger, and you have this sort of tragedy of the commons, right? If something is too cheap,
right,
people take advantage of it. So what happened was, some staff at Hedera monitoring this, obviously, they saw this behavior happen a few times. They put together a proposal. They take that to the coin committee, which is comprised of some of those council members. And they put a proposal together to make it 0.005 cents instead of 0.001 cent. And then the coin committee approves that. We notify on the testnet all the developers that this change is going to happen, so they can change their code accordingly, and then it gets deployed to production. So, never any surprises is what we want for our developer community.
So, Christian, I have a follow-up question on fees. As you can see in the screen here, there's three different types of fees here. There's a service fee, there's a network fee, and a node fee. How is that distributed among the community in these three different categories? Is it broken down by?
Yes. So as a developer, you pay a single API. You do not have to worry about who am I paying. It's just, a single payment. On the back end, there is a small fee, and it really depends on the type of API call that you're doing, just for accessing that service. That's the service fee. There's a small fee which goes to the overall network as well. And then so right now we have council members, these global organizations running the nodes on the network. They need to be compensated for running nodes. And in the future, there are 2 additional phases. We will do permissioned nodes where companies who aren't these global organizations can run nodes on the network. And then the next phase after that, like phase 3, is permissionless nodes where anyone can join, drop from the network at any time. And so node fees are the incentive in order for people to, run nodes. So those are the 3 types of fees. Breaking down like the percentage, I can't do in real time because it's a bit complex, but those are the 3 types.
So for the node, for the node validators that are bringing in the most HBAR, what are the hardware specifications for that?
Yeah, so on our GitHub, I can actually find it and just drop in the link. We have the current hardware requirements for running a node, and these will change over time. So these don't factor in things like GPU today, but because honestly, we don't need that. Hashgraph is so fast as it is, we don't need that additional power today. But, in the future, when we do, we can just change that. So let me drop in the reference configuration right here. And you can take a look. How do I do that here?
Just send me the link and I'll share it.
I was going to put it
in the YouTube stream.
I'll put it in the YouTube stream. Great idea.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Perfect.
Yes.
Now, backtracking a little bit, when you were talking about the gossip system, is that kind of like a swarm? Same principle as a swarm network?
I'm not so familiar with that, so I can't. I can't really, talk to that specifically. But a gossip protocol itself is incredibly common in blockchain technologies or even distributed databases. It is the way that a node learns something from another node. What makes it unique are these 2 additional properties that you also know who told you that information and when they told it to you. And that's what makes Hashgraph gossip about gossip unique.
Yeah, that node tracing is a really cool feature that I didn't even think about until right now. That's definitely a game changer.
What I want to know is, it doesn't use blockchain, right? Hedera doesn't use any blockchain per se. Where is all this data being stored?
Fantastic. So the data itself, so the architecture is, the Hashgraph is the history of who talked to whom, who you learned it from, when you learned it. That's Hashgraph. The data is actually stored in what we call mirror nodes. So mirror nodes watch everything that's happening on the mainnet, and you choose what you want to store. So Hedera has a mirror node that you can subscribe to. It's available through Google Cloud as like a one-click deploy, or it's available through AWS as well. And then we have community mirror nodes set up that store the history as well. But the beautiful thing is, if you're running an application, you don't want to store everyone's history. You want to store your history of your application and serve that up to your customers. And so this architecture allows you to do that by running a mirror node. And then you have your customers subscribe to your mirror node, and they can validate that mirror node against the main net. And then when we have state proofs, that well, we do have state proof alpha today, but when we have full state proofs, that provides additional trust of the network as well. So the architecture is almost the exact opposite of a blockchain. So what you see blockchains do, blockchains store all of the data on the chain, and they're starting to move the consensus operations away from the history so that they can run much faster and then have these roll-ups and things like that. And with the flip side, we run all the consensus at this layer 1, which is super duper fast, and give you the choice of what you want to store, where you want to store it.
So if I wanted to, now let's move forward. If I wanted to start up a company using Hedera, and all the data is very, very sensitive information, can I make my own node private and just use the Hashgraph just for the gossiping purposes to maintain the data structure and the reliability of returning that data back to either my customers or myself?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the most common architectural patterns that we see today. So we just announced, yesterday, day before, we announced Shinhan Bank, which is a really large bank in Korea. They're looking at central bank digital currencies. Last month, we announced Standard Bank, which is the largest bank in South Africa. They're looking at using Hedera and central bank digital currency. And that architecture that you just talked about is exactly why they're so excited about Hedera, because they can set up, and Standard Bank actually did a webinar recently with Hedera and IBM where they talk about this architecture. They can run a private permissioned network where all of that data is locked in their own permission network. It's all encrypted. No one else from the outside world can see it, completely locked down, can do anything they want to it, and use Hedera consensus service for public consensus, public trust, fair ordering of these transactions, so that you get this best of both worlds, where you get a fine-grained control of a private network or even a centralized database with the visibility and trust and transparency of a public network using the Hedera consensus algorithm. There isn't another network that has an architecture like that, which is why you're seeing enterprises adopt Hedera so that it can really operate in this architectural pattern.
All right. So
interesting.
I was reading in regards to the nodes in the gossiping system that there is no such thing as 100% consensus, that there is a point within the activity of gossip that there might be some nodes that will disagree with the overall consensus. Now, from my understanding, Hedera, the overall idea of hash graphing is having all these nodes come to a consensus regardless if there's just a handful of nodes that don't agree, and the overall consensus will determine that what's been pushed through the hash graph is to be absolutely true. Now, is it possible to have that opposite effect where there's more bad nodes than good nodes?
You could have more bad nodes than good nodes, and this is why. So just a little truth telling. Any blockchain operates under a 1/3 principle. If you have 1/3 plus one node of the nodes as malicious actors, then the whole network is unfeasible. Same for Hedera Hashgraph, by the way. So you need that 2/3 of nodes to be honest actors, come to consensus. And I think that's exactly what you're driving at. Where Mance and Lehman thought about, okay, we want this to be trusted by enterprises. We want real businesses solving real business problems, building real applications on the network. How do we foster that trust? You can't run the risk of having, lots of bad actors. So we bootstrapped trust by having this professional council of large organizations that they're not going to do something to undermine their own brand. They're not going to do something to act against their own self-interests. So you can pretty much bet that 100% of those nodes are honest. And then as we add these other phases, we've bootstrapped trust to the degree, and we then have this proof of stake model where you actually have to have stake of HBARs in order to run these nodes. So it's a real proof of stake system that will keep these nodes honest. And of course, you'll have the odd bad actor here and there. Absolutely, that's going to happen. But as we scale, when I talked about setting off with decentralization as the initial premise, but ensuring it becomes, as decentralized or more decentralized over time, that's the approach that we're taking to that.
All right. So in order to be a node, you need to stake your HBAR, correct?
Correct. When we reach these permissioned community nodes, you will have to, because your consensus weighting in the system is based off of the number of HBARs that are staked to you. So you want to appeal to people to, stake their HBARs to your node so that you can, participate in overall consensus.
What is the minimum, what is the minimum requirement to stake?
So because we're not in that phase yet, we have not published any of those requirements yet. So hard to say right now. We're still in that, professional council members running the initial nodes in the network.
Public right now.
So you are open to build on it. You don't have to tell anyone that you're building on it, using it in any way, but run a node, you cannot do that today.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
You can run a mirror node, no problem. You can run a mirror node. You can serve up interesting data. You can have people subscribe to your mirror node, pay you for that access, no problem at all. But an actual mainnet consensus node, what you think of as a validator node in other networks, you cannot run that today.
So if a small business wanted to make their own, closed node to make digitally scarce assets for trading and minting amongst itself, what would it take to get that to happen?
So they would run their own nodes. These are called like business logic nodes. You might use something like Hyperledger Fabric or R3 Corda. And, you as a small business consortium, you'd say, hey, let's actually all set up our nodes and let's store the data and the business logic in this application layer, this application network. And then we'll have Hedera do all the consensus operations and the ordering of these transactions. So actually, if your AppNet nodes are untrustworthy with one another, it actually doesn't matter because you're inheriting the trust from Hedera, the trust of consensus itself. So that's the architectural pattern that I was talking about. Today, when you build a consortium with a permissioned blockchain network like Hyperledger Fabric, before Hedera came along, you all actually have to run this business logic, and you also have to run consensus nodes as well. And if someone leaves the consortium, then that's really painful because now how do you remove one of these consensus nodes? If someone joins the consortium, how do you add a consensus node? So by offloading consensus to this public network with Hedera, you just have to worry about running the business logic. And sure, you have to trust that people are going to store that data correctly. They're not going to have security leaks, and but it's a different kind of trust from the actual consensus.
That's really cool.
There's a question from the community. from the Hedera community. They're asking that I'm just going to read this. It says, I believe Lehman said at one point a node can be ran on a cell phone. Do you know anything about that? I haven't heard about that, but it's curious. I'm kind of interested in that.
Yes. So what that talks about is the actual Hashgraph SDK. So not in a public ledger mainnet consensus node. But if you wanted to run Hashgraph, you can run Hashgraph on a Raspberry Pi, on your cell phone. It's so computationally lightweight that you can run that. And you can actually go to Swirlds, which is the company Lehman co-founded Swirlds, and that's the IP holder of Hashgraph. You can download the Swirlds SDK, and you can run that on a Raspberry Pi. That is very different from running a mainnet node, which in addition to having Hashgraph, has all of this services logic on top of it as well. That's much more computationally intense than just Hashgraph. So when he talks about running on a phone, he's specifically talking about the Hashgraph consensus algorithm itself.
Interesting. Now you said that we're not to the point where the nodes are open to the public, but the community does have the opportunity to open up a mirror node and utilize that. Now
that's correct. Yes.
Now I'm all about trying to earn some more HBAR. Now, can I earn HBAR having a mirror node?
Not yet. So it may be in the future. I can't share any plans, but for for running different types of nodes. Oh, because one of the big things we didn't talk about is like a validator bridge network between other blockchains and Hedera. So in order to incentivize people to run a bridge, so that type of nodes, there most likely will be some sort of incentive to do so. But today, there is no way to earn HBAR in running a mirror node where you're earning it from the Hedera treasury. You could offer up services running a mirror node and have people subscribe to them, and you could accept payment in HBAR, not a problem. But that would be your own sort of business setup that you'd look to do that with.
Now, going by memory, I believe Hedera was funded by an ICO, correct?
We did not do an ICO. We did called a SAFT, which is a simple agreement for future tokens. So it was a Reg D offering, so SEC compliant, actually filed with the SEC, where you basically say, we are only going to take money, investment from accredited investors. And in order to, buy into, we had 3 rounds of funding, you had to be an accredited investor. And you were buying just this promise of getting HBARs at some point in the future. So obviously, high risk, and, all done in a very compliant way. And people do from time to time say, oh, you did an ICO, but it was not an ICO. It was this thing called a SAFT, which isn't very well known, the ICO craze, doing it. And we raised money during that period. It was just a very different investment vehicle from an ICO.
Right. Now, another question from the community, which I'm going to have to vouch for as well, is that I just recently heard about Hedera. And Hedera has been out for a few years. And it's something that apparently has not really been worked on from the Hedera community to really get marketing out there about Hedera. Trust me, there's a lot of people out there that don't know what Hedera Hashgraph is. Never heard of it. Literally, I heard about it just a few months ago, like around the beginning of the year. And once I looked into it, I go, wow, this is an amazing piece of technology. I'm surprised I have not heard about this. It never came onto my radar at all. What are you guys doing to really get Hedera out there in the public's eye?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we market very differently from every other network out there. You will never hear us market HBAR itself. So we don't talk about HBAR except in the context of what HBAR is used for on the Hedera network, which is currently to pay for the network services and also to, in the future, to secure the network, maintain the safety of the entire network through this proxy staking model, this proof of stake model. So most other projects talk about their actual cryptocurrency, and that's where you see a lot of influencers getting excited and talking about what we do from a marketing is we always bear in mind that we are the representatives of these global brands. And so we are very careful when it comes to how we represent Hedera, what we talk about Hedera. So what we market are the use cases being built and deployed on Hedera. And that is a very slow, methodical enterprise software approach, but it pays off in spades over time. So as you just talked about, you today, John and Mike, you can't run a node on Hedera. So you can't earn HBARs for running a node. That's unlike other blockchain platforms where you can spin up a node and start earning their cryptocurrency. You can't stake your HBARs today and earn a return. So the kinds of things that other blockchain networks really market, buy this coin, put it in your wallet, earn this reward, run this node, earn this reward. That's fantastic. That gets the retail investor super duper excited. What I would argue is when we turn that on in the future, people will be like, wow, you have this thing now staking and I can run a node that I can do on every other platform. Great. But wow, you have hundreds of real use cases running on your network with these big names. I would say it's going to be harder for other blockchain networks to get that kind of adoption than it is for us to, in the future, flip to the kind of marketing that maybe you see from other blockchain networks. So this is a slow, methodical approach. It's very careful, but I think it's already starting to pay off. Like this year, we've hit an awareness curve across social channels and engagement that we didn't have last year. And, I think that will continue to go up. And then when we have that story for the retail investor, then I think it's going to get very exciting indeed.
Christian, I want to play the devil's advocate for a moment. Let's say that, first of all, the nodes are private and locked. Nobody can get in and tamper with that, right? Those are locked. It's only to a select few, and these are mainly enterprises heavily invested in Hedera. Obviously, they have a lot of money in Hedera, therefore, they're not going to do anything wrong, right? They're not going to try to be a bad node per se, right?
They don't have money in Hedera. Everything else you're saying is true. Everyone locks their node software, though. If you're running a node on any other blockchain platform, you don't want someone to be able to hack into that node. But right now, what you're saying is absolutely true, that the council members themselves are the only ones running those nodes. That is absolutely true.
Well, you said something there that caught my attention. You said that they're not monetarily invested in Hedera. Why is that? And what's the benefit of them being part of Hedera? Obviously, being a node gives them a lot of features, correct? I guess that would be the benefit.
Yes. So they are, these are companies that earn billions of dollars of revenue. So there's no monetary incentive that we could give them that would be appealing enough to join the governing council. They join the governing council because they believe in the model and they're interested in the technology itself, about how that technology could be leveraged by their business to unlock the next $1 billion of revenue. That's what they're interested in, and learning from their peers, networking with each other, understanding how can you adopt this technology, what lines of business can you spin out of this, how do you reduce your bottom line? Like, in a lot of respects, it's enterprise software. How do we use this thing? And that's what's really exciting.
Interesting. That's amazing. That's so amazing that they're actually utilizing the technology. They're not just bag holders. They're actually using it, which is another big, amazing thing. That's awesome. I'm so just mind blown about that. But continuing on, so I was thinking, since these nodes are private, let's say, for example, I want to create a product and I want to sell music. Somebody that's very underground, and I'm selling, let's say, I'm selling techno, right? But the council doesn't agree with my music because they
no. Okay, so yeah, this is great question. By the way, let me clear this up.
Please.
So the Hedera Governing Council, they just run the nodes. You can use those nodes, access those nodes. The council can't shut down your application. They have no visibility into your application. You call the mainnet. You code against the mainnet. You don't have to have a license to build on Hedera. You don't have to tell Hedera who you are. You build your application on Hedera, away you go. It is a truly public network. The nodes are permissioned. That means who can actually run those nodes is permissioned. Who can use the network is completely public. So I'm really glad you asked that question, actually, because I think we get a lot of.
I'm mind blown about the response, because it just. I want to try to find a weakness. I want to find a point where Hedera fails, right? And that some of the blockchain, I just want to go, I found it. I found the weakness. But it seems like every angle, and in spending all this time looking into Hedera, it's just a beautiful piece of technology, without a doubt. I guess the only thing I could say is
the weaknesses. I think you've dug in on the weaknesses, honestly, which is that today, you, John, and you, Mike, cannot spin up a mainnet consensus node and participate in consensus and earn node fees for doing that work. And, if you're a blockchain purist, then that's bad. I mean, that is something that is a critique of Hedera, which is absolutely true. Now, it's only true for a moment in time for very good reason, but you have a lot of people that look at you and say, oh, because today you're not permissionless, I'm going to write you off, because they don't buy into the whole journey that we're on. But when you talk about no weaknesses in Hedera, that is because Mance and Lehman have thought about how can this public network be trusted today, but how can it also be trusted in 100 years' time? That's really where they think, and they're incredibly smart individuals. They worked on, you've seen the movie War Games, right? Back in the 80s.
Great movie.
They were the two guys that worked on that War Games system and actually did the early advanced machine learning algorithms for that system. So they have thought about this in a way that, maybe other blockchain platforms have. I don't know, I can't comment, but I can certainly say that, they have thought about how do we future-proof this thing when, we're all dead and gone. Hedera is keeping on going and people can bank on it.
So it sounds like you don't want to tell me what's going to be coming up in the near future. So I'm literally digging through your roadmap to see what I can find.
Oh, yeah, it's on there. I did tell you some stuff. Yeah. And the GitHub repo is very active as well. So you can look on that. We talked about scheduled transactions. Yeah. We've talked about this stuff. Interoperability integrations, the validator network. There you go. All good.
So
all good stuff.
If someone wanted to make a digitally scarce asset or an NFT on HBAR, could they do that today?
Yes,
and
in like 5 minutes.
What's the minimum cost of that?
So it costs you $1 to mint a token, and then 0.001 cents to transact that token.
Wow.
So if, like, let's just say I wanted to make my own node, mint my own NFT, but the NFT could never leave my node, and I wouldn't want it to leave my node either way. Do I just have to pay that one transactional fee? Or do I still have to pay the $1 to someone else?
So you would mint your token on Hedera for $1. It's Mike token. And then you own that token. You have an account ID, 00 dot, our account methodology naming protocol is so easy. It's 0.0 and then a string of numbers that's like 5 digits long. That's your account ID. That's where your token is stored, and it will always be stored. And if in the future you send that token to someone, that's when you would pay the 0.001 cents to send that token to someone else.
Okay.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, the use case I was thinking was possibly something like an IoT thing where some kind of media got uploaded as the asset and then just had to get moved somewhere, like to another database, but still all remain in-house.
Yes. So with that, you'd use a combination of that Hedera consensus service and Hedera token service. So you'd set up your application logic where because it's expensive to store the media on Hedera. So you store your media on, S3 or in a database or in a private permission network, and there are multiple copies of the media, and you hash that to Hedera consensus service. So the network knows exactly where the original content lies, and we have applications doing this today. I can talk about those in a minute if you want. And then you mint your own token to then transact with that media however you want.
Okay, so just to clarify, that hash that I'm uploading and it's moving around on the network, could that be an IPFS hash?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So there is a company today called Numbers Protocol, and they work with Reuters. There's actually on our website, if you look at the users and go to Project Starling, for 180 days leading up to the last election and post the last election, even including the January 6th Capitol riots, the Reuters photographer actually took photos, and those photos were uploaded to IPFS, just like you're saying. But as they stream from the camera and get uploaded, they're hashed using Hedera consensus service. So you have the trusted timestamps and fair ordering and media authentication coming from your device. And then the actual photos themselves are stored in IPFS.
So the distribution's in Hedera.
Correct.
For what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I would recommend going and reading up that case study. It's so cool. We did some stuff with Filecoin around it, and I imagine that will be, IPFS is a great system. I imagine a lot of companies will use this same sort of architecture.
It sounds like Hedera just has so much flexibility to grow. It's so unbelievable. You guys just crossed the 1 billion transaction. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, 2 days ago.
1 billion.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? How did you get that? That blows my mind. How is that even possible? So here's a question in regards to the gossiping protocol, gossiping system. Is it possible to get so many people on that particular network at that time? Because from my understanding, when the gossip is happening, it's happening through pieces of timestamps per se, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Pieces of timestamps. Now, if this timestamp has so much traffic, is it possible to bottleneck that system? For example, a DDoS.
So we currently are throttled to 10,000 transactions per second. And so you would need to generate an awful lot of transactions in order to DDoS the network. The Hashgraph consensus algorithm is DDoS resistant itself, but the nodes, that is where you use these other mechanisms like pricing. So, maybe if we saw it getting to 9,000 transactions per second. By the way, we're about 70 transactions per second right now. So you can see there's a lot of headroom in the system to grow. But, if you saw something like that, then the network itself would start to do some things to disincentivize people from DDoSing the network itself.
Mike, you got anything? Because actually, here's a question from the community. The community wants some clarification in regards to Hedera being a centralized proof of stake because of the governance.
So it's absolutely a critique if you say we have 20 governing council members today, each of them running a node on the network. So if your definition of centralization is you have a professional governing council that is in 6 continents, in 10 different industries that have to be term limited, so they'll leave at some point. If you don't buy into that is a definition of decentralization, and your only definition of decentralization is I need to see that anyone can run a node anywhere in the world, then okay, I can't change your mind. What I would say is that even something like Ethereum or Bitcoin, which have thousands and thousands of nodes, right? Tens of thousands of nodes. There are things called mining pools, and that is where you aggregate hashing power, and maybe you move that to where electricity is cheap. And so maybe there are 5 mining pools which have most of the hashing power. So if you look at it through that lens, 20 nodes, each running in a different data center by reputable companies on different continents, all dispersed around the world,
and no
you could argue that's more decentralized than those systems. But if you're a purist and you're immersed in traditional blockchain, and I'm not knocking you for that way, I'm not, there's a lot of education to be done, then we by my definition, we're more decentralized systems.
Now, for the 20 validators, no one company or entity owns more than one, right?
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and their weighted stake and consensus evenly distributed, so no one has more weighted consensus stake than anyone else.
Interesting. those that are watching live on the YouTube, make sure if you have a question, leave a question. This is an amazing interview. I appreciate it. Christian.
Oh, we lost Mike.
Doing an awesome
Mike's
job.
back.
Yeah, he's fine. He'll
No
come
problem.
I just drop out. Yeah, sorry about that.
Christian,
I will have to drop for dinner in like 10 minutes, but
okay, we'll wrap this up in
go for
about
more.
10 minutes. Is there anything else that I have not brought up that you believe that should be discussed here now for the community out there? And keep in mind that this will be distributed in all around the globe because we are connected to the internet.
Yeah, so let me take another critique, just because you're going to, I want to be as forthright as possible. Another critique we have is, so at the very bottom of our stack is the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. On top of the Hashgraph consensus algorithm are the services layer, so Hedera consensus service and Hedera token service. Everything above the Hashgraph consensus algorithm is completely open source. You can do whatever you want with it, contribute to it, blah, 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 fork it, whatever you want. The Hashgraph consensus algorithm itself is patented technology, and it is something called open review. So as a developer, you can take the Hashgraph consensus algorithm code, you can read it, you can compile it, you can check for bugs, you can try and find security flaws, but you cannot take that Hashgraph consensus algorithm and build another public network that is underpinned by Hashgraph. So Hedera Hashgraph is the only public ledger built on Hashgraph. It will always be the only public ledger built on Hashgraph. Well, actually, when the patent expires in, I don't know when, you could have others, but for the foreseeable future, it is the only one. And you have a lot of people that say, oh, because the consensus algorithm is patented, I'm not going to build on you. What I would say to those people is there are very few people in the world with a developer skill set that ever need to touch a consensus algorithm. You're talking about, very, very, very few people. So the code above it that's open source is really, as a developer, where you want to live. And people don't understand that all of that is open source and completely open source under Apache 2 license. Have at it. And so you're talking about 95% of the code is open source, and then 5% is open review. And I think that's worth saying. You didn't ask me about patented technology.
Interesting. Now, there is a gossip out there about Hedera that there might be some connection with a CBDC here pretty soon in the near future. Do you know anything about that?
Standard Bank has talked very openly about their interest in central bank digital currency. That is not a secret. The Shinhan Bank announcements that we made a couple of days ago talked about their interest in central bank digital currency and running a pilot with LG CNS, which is the services arm of LG. LG is also a council member of Hedera. So what I can't comment on at this time is Hedera's role in CBDC, but we have council members who are very interested in it and are council members. And, what I would say to people is central banks around the world are all looking at this, but it isn't that you're going to wake up, next year and have a digital currency running on a public ledger. There's a long way to go. There are going to be pilots, proofs of concept, learning along the way. Central banks are going to move very methodically, very slowly. But it's an exciting space. And we're sponsoring Consensus this year. We're actually sponsoring the CBDC track at Consensus. And Ian Putter, who is the head of blockchain at Standard Bank, will be doing a presentation at Consensus around CBDC. So yeah, it's exciting for sure.
Awesome. That's awesome. There is one more question. And I don't know what this is about because I have not found anything on it. The Hedera Boost program. If you can explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Hedera Boost program is a small incentive program for building your application on Hedera and receiving some compensation for doing so. It's in a bit of a holding pattern right now because we're trying to figure out what the next iteration of that program is. If you go to developers, it should be actually under devs, I think. Anyway, yeah, there is a program called Boost, and you can reach out to us and see if there are, some incentives. It's not very much today, but again, we're re-examining all of our practices and seeing, how we can do better in that regard.
All right. So far.
And by the way, anyone watching, you can email me, christian@hedera.com. Super easy. I won't have all the answers, but I can plug you in with people that do. On Twitter, I'm pretty responsive at Chaska, like this name here in Discord. And, I try to be pretty responsive as well there.
Awesome, Christian. Thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. I greatly appreciate all that you've given us right now. I hope to have you back very soon. Well, maybe about a month from now. Just give us a fresh update of what's going on Hedera.
Sure.
I'm sure you're a busy man, but I'm very curious. And I know Mike and we're going to continue to dig into Hedera and start working on some dApps. I'm sure that's what we're going to do because we like tinkering with stuff. So with that said,
tinker away. I'm so we're in an education phase.
Yeah.
I submitted my first HIP, so I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right, Christian.
Well, if you don't hit back on it, you just ping me and I'll chase it for you.
What's the usual turnover time on that?
So I know our developers watch it very closely. So you should actually, if you joined our Discord channel, our developers are really responsive there. And you can just flag that you submitted this HIP and ask for an update on it. Because it's in a priority, it depends really. If it's something super easy that's like a no-brainer thing and TechCom meets every 2 weeks and reviews HIPs, you're probably looking at, depending on what the cycle is, at a pretty quick turnaround there. And if it's something meatier, then, you might need additional buy-in from other community members, and that can take, a bit longer.
So they usually get at least brought up for development every 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, one last question. Do you guys have a marketing department for IoT or a development department for IoT features?
So we are a very sort of team, and we work with a lot of development partners and systems integrators that want to build like industry specific or vertical specific functionality. So the answer is no. We're a general purpose platform. So we build functionality that can then be extended or utilized if your interest is in IoT micropayments and you have ideas around that, fantastic. Submit those. Is it a new service? Maybe. Is it an extension of another service? Probably. Is there something in the SDK that gets installed on the actual sensor itself that's doing things? Probably. So there's a ton of scope for collaborating and participating there.
Cool. That's great.
Awesome, Christian. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure you have dinner waiting.
I hope so. If not, I got to go cook it.
The community greatly appreciates you being on the podcast. And this is your community. They came to see you without a doubt. And the one thing that they really want from you is to have more marketing. They want more information of what's going on. They really appreciate you being on the podcast and doing this for them. Because you did this for them. You're not doing this for me at all. We're sharing crypto and blockchain knowledge, even though this is not blockchain, we're sharing this information to the world, and hopefully they understand a little bit more. And they are without a doubt. And it's all because of you, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, there's so much to tell, and we're constantly looking for ways and avenues to. So thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Should definitely have a follow-up episode.
Absolutely. So
yeah, happy to come on anytime.
This was just
thank you very much.
Was just an intro. So if you want, reach out to the community, ask them if they want you to come back on the podcast and talk some more. I would definitely have you back on, without a doubt. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions because they're starting to roll in now, but we're going to go ahead and wrap it up and save those questions for the next time. So with that said,
awesome.
Sats and HODL. Adios.
Thank you very much.